Hello, my name is Sharon Hill, and this is my reflection assignment thinking theologically about community. As I was thinking about what I wanted to say in this video, I wanted to make sure that I answered the questions that are asked, but I also wanted to talk about community for me. Before entering in School of Divinity, I had a slightly different view of community. It was a very narrow view actually. I thought community was my family or my race or definitely my church. And in my very ethnic neighborhood, I grew up in the projects of Greensboro, North Carolina, called Smith Homes. And in that neighborhood, church was almost the pillar or the saving grace or the place where you go to get some type of relief from all of the strains of what I would call poverty. And the pastor, who was always praying for the flock, he was always making sure to encourage. And he was always giving us scriptures. Being little, I didn't really understand a whole lot when you see, the women going into church, they holding the Bible, they had white gloves on or some type of gloves on and a hat. And then the men would have suits and a hat that they would take off before they walked into the church. And I just knew that that was a place people went every single week like clockwork. And then as I grew up and as I, learned more about church and the value it has in the community of giving hope, of being able to help people, the churches that I've been a part of, most of them were a part of feeding the community, helping the less fortunate, and constantly praying for the city and the community and the neighborhoods. And in some cases, our pastor would even get politically involved and be at certain rallies and things of that nature in support of social justice and fairness. I believe if it wasn't for my pastor, and me being able to, go up to him, talk to him, I had not up until recently experienced having a female pastor. But most of my growing up, the pastors were always male. And my mother thoroughly kept me in church. It developed the belief system that I currently have right now. So, but the definition of community is that any group of people that are of like mind or that have the same interest can be community. So, outside of family and my neighborhood, and of course, church, then that would mean for me, community was my athletic teams that I was on. I remember before each game, we would always say the Serenity Prayer, right? We would always say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thine will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. And that Lord's Prayer, we prayed before every single game. And I remember thinking, why do we always say this before I just did not understand the value of the Lord's Prayer. I didn't understand what the Lord's Prayer really meant because I was going to church but checking the box, right? To say I went to church, go home, still sinning, and still doing whatever I want to do, right? So, community for me was athletics. And when I graduated, of course, in from High Point University, um, I that was also my community. Like the student body was my community. I was very popular. Unfortunately, it wasn't anything of my doing other than being a pretty decent athlete and a pretty decent person. Of course, that's what I've been told. I just thought it was just me being myself. And I also realized that there are all different types of community, and it does have value when you can feel like you belong to others, that there is a belonging where you feel like you have value in that particular group. And my human experience of it has been, I can see how people that are alone go crazy. Like people in prison, in solitary, can literally go crazy. We've even had instances where you've heard, that babies, when they come to the world, they need to have physical touch. So, community has an extreme value, even in the sanity of human beings, that feeling of belonging. I remember reading in chapter 14 where it says sometimes you can talk to someone and talk them into believing their dignity. You do what you can to make a person feel unashamed of themselves, and you hope in time they'll believe in their beauty all on their own. That was on page 14 in co-author Riley's um, chapter 1. And I remember thinking that, wow, I have had instances myself where my community just kept saying, Sharon, there's something in you. Sharon, there is something that God is doing in you. Now, this is what they were saying even as a small child. And so I was like, wow, I don't know what that means. I had no concept and still really do not, if I'm telling the truth. Don't really have a concept of God is doing something with you and that you're special. Never could figure out what that something, there's something special in you, what that was. But I do know it had me show up differently because in growing up in the projects and thinking that, I got to figure out how many kids I can have in order to get that government check so that I can afford to move out of my mama's house and be able to afford to put my kids in daycare for free and be able to have that money to be able to survive. And that mindset was my mindset before I met another community called Dudley Products Incorporated. Now, Joel Dudley Sr. is a prominent icon in the Black community because at the age of 40, he became a millionaire selling products door to door. And he grew his company in Greensboro, North Carolina. He was a student of S.B. Fuller, who was a mentor for him, who was in Chicago, Illinois. Well, long-term story short, I end up doing an intern with that company, just doing data entry for the company. But I saw women dressed in suits. I saw them wearing pantyhose and nice heels, and their hair was done, their makeup was done, their nails were done, they were elegant, they spoke well, they were smart, they had MBAs. And I didn't even realize that I could go to college at that point. It's like when I say internship, I was doing like a job trying to intern, and I didn't think I was going to get a good job. I just thought I was, going to school so that I could get something maybe a little bit better than McDonald's, but not so much, right? So graduating from High Point University, and being a part and end up getting hired at Dudley Products. I was there 16 years. Now, here's some things that happened in that community that really, you know, spoke to some of the things that we were talking about in our reading in regards to belonging. So I found that every single morning at 8 o'clock, we would meet. And we're talking meetings that encompass up to 50 to 75 people every single morning that work for the company. Women would be on one side, men would be on the other. And I really didn't think about it at the time, but I felt great being with all those professional women, even though I didn't see myself professionally. And we also had a lot of, Mr. Dudley they thought he was never an ordained minister, but he definitely read the Bible. He was constantly quoting from the Bible. He was constantly giving good tools on how to run a business. And he said the Bible is the best book on how to run a business. I was like, are you kidding me? But, as he would talk about, you can't add loss to loss. Tough times don't last, but tough people do. He would always tell us, seek and ye shall find. Knock and the door shall be open. He would always bring out quotes from the Bible that would inspire us to go out door to door and do it one more day, right? And then that community's ritual was to sing a song at the end of the day. And it was to determine who the king or queen was for that day, going out selling products door to door. And it was a song that says, who's knocking doors in your neighborhood while you were out playing around? And then they would do a countdown like who had $10 or who had $20 or who had $30. And they would go all the way up. And when it gets to your money that you had for that day, you would sit down. And the last one standing was the king or queen for the day. So those are some types of things that happen in Dudley Products. I end up coming in the company door to door, and by the time I was there 16 years, but by the time I was finished there, I had the opportunity of being able to run their cosmetology university that at the time was in Kernersville for about 2 years. I really enjoyed that opportunity in that community. And guess what? We all are still in touch with each other, even though we no longer work for the company. And when I say we, it's some of the sales reps that I had trained and that I had managed and things of that nature. But that was also a form of community. And I also remember reading in page 70 in chapter 6, where it talked about, we can become so desperate for connection that we make havoc from all the hungry parts of ourselves. It makes us restless. It can make us consume others instead of embrace them. Maybe we have habitually ignored boundaries of a friend because we fear absence will end in abandonment. And wow, I remember feeling like because of hurt, because of, caring about someone, calling them a friend and being betrayed. And I remember feeling like, I don't think I want to do this. Maybe I just don't think this will work. So maybe I'll just be solo. Maybe I'll have associates, but never really call anyone my friend. And then you have some women that say, I don't deal with women, right? And because I've always been hurt, I've always been stabbed in the back, they slept with my man, they did this, they did that. So that kind of hurt would cause that kind of thought. And I was like, wow, this is really, very interesting, the word community and how leaders, in our community, how they are building community. What are they doing? You've got different organizations that have started within communities, you know, that special, in my community, we have the NAACP. That's another community that's fighting for social justice. Um, it just is very interesting to know, and even to kind of just think about, are communities helpful? Well, sometimes, but you also have judgment in communities. I remember feeling judged because I was married twice. I remember when I was young going into church feeling judged because I maybe had on a dress that just a tad bit over my knee. Um, and I've also in companies felt very hurt when I was accused of actually sleeping with Mr. Dudley himself. And I reverenced him like a father. And he did. He spent a lot of time with me. But to be accused of him really hurt my feelings. And that was in a community of people you know, who looked at me differently because they were jealous of the time that Mr. and Mrs. Dudley were spending with me because they wanted to coach me. And I never did understand those types of things. It was very hurtful. Um, and I just wanted to, fix things. I wanted to be nice. I became a people pleaser. It mattered to me and my community how my community thought about me. And it wasn't until I, started getting into life coaching, which that was interesting within itself. Because when I was terminated from Dudley Products after 16 years because they were downsizing, I came home and my husband said, "Hey, this lady named Sharima wants to talk with you." And she works with Mary Kay Cosmetics. And I was very interested in owning my own business. And so I was interested in listening to her and I ended up joining Mary Kay Cosmetics. But wow, what an amazing community that was. There was a group of women, very powerful, very knowledgeable, who, if you've ever read Mary Kay's book, it was just so phenomenal about all the things that she went through just to try to, you know, climb the corporate ladder, so to speak, and to be noticed as a valuable member and leader in companies. But she was ignored and overlooked because she was a woman. And so she started her own company called Mary Kay Cosmetics. And we would meet every single day. We would talk to our directors. We would have some sales goals. And these were the things that was happening in that community. Well, my director ended up talking to me about a life coaching course. It wasn't a course, it really was a life coaching class called Falling Awake. And then I got exposed to a whole new community of people who were from every walk of life. They were janitors, they were secretaries, they were managers, they were business owners, they were billion-dollar owners. There was about 250 people in that room. And I know my price was $450, and I think their price was too. So that was a lot of people. And in 3 days, they transformed my whole thinking about community. And they let me know that community starts inside of you. It starts inside of you. And yes, you're a part of community, but how you interact in communities that you're a part of is where you get the value and where you make the difference and where you can destroy or you can impact very positively. But it starts within you too. So I started to think in my life coaching classes before I became a life coach, who am I in relationship to how I think about myself and community? Like, there are people who go into a community, a group of people that they have like minds, and they show up. But when they're not in community, they're depressed. They don't like themselves. They don't. They don't feel important or valued. And for me, I had to make sure that I cultivated that inside of me first in order for me to be a valuable member of whatever community I decided to be a part of. And I really do believe that when you're in community and you're experiencing community, once you're there, you can evaluate, how does this impact my life? Is it a positive impact? Is it a negative impact? Is it challenging? Does it help my life? And I have to evaluate every community that I'm in. One of the things that I've learned, that even in the different groups that I'm in, community doesn't even begin to take place. And I learned this actually being a trainer, corporate trainer for Aon Hewitt, where I got to train brand new people who did not know each other, and they could be from the age of 18 to 50. And they could be in a call center, a manager, or a vice president. They all came through my orientation. And what I noticed was, each time, or what I started to do to develop community, I would have moments in time where people would get to share themselves intimately and share something about themselves. And the first thing I would ask them on day one is, tell me something about you. I wouldn't know about you just by looking at you. And you got some of the most awesome answers. And it was like, wow, it even helped you remember people's names by what they told you about them that you wouldn't know just by looking at them. And I said, wow, that was impactful. And then what I started to notice, I put some actual buddies together so that the buddies could do homework and practice and help each other, especially with the systems that we were teaching them. And one person could call in, another person would try to find the answer in the systems, and vice versa. So I put buddies together. So that formed another subset of community, right? So they were able to talk to each other intimately and get to know each other, and be able to show up, and get some things done in the classroom as a buddy. And then what I also did to start to have them feel like they belonged, right? I had them and asked them questions about, what do you think about certain topics? And if you were the owner, what would you do to change it? And started getting some information from them, some input from them about their own training that they were going through, right? And then some other things that I remember doing to develop community was, we had a potluck every Friday. And people would bring different dishes from their culture. And it was just amazing on how we would eat together. The food was fantastic. And then at the end of each class, I would have each and every person come up to the front of the room one at a time. And when that one person was in the front of the room, each person would tell them, who's ever in the front of the room, what they admired most about them. I can't tell you how many tissue boxes I went through. And I can't tell you how wonderful it was for people to experience being acknowledged in a very positive way from people that they just met in a training class, right? And that had a powerful impact in building a community and a feeling of belonging at Aon Hewitt, so that when they went to their prospective roles, they still communicated with each other. They had graduations and they started having little functions and bowling and different teams because they graduated from orientation at a different time. So I got a really good dose of um, learning to develop community. And those are some of the things that really helped me when I looked at this assignment. And even just to distinguish, how ministry leaders understand and practice community, I learned some of the things I was doing from ministry, my pastors, my deacons, um, my mothers in the church, my own family members, that helped me understand that it's very important to help people know who they are in the Lord. And that is one of the things that probably has shaped how I treat people and how I'm able to love unconditionally. Now, I know that sounds really like an oxymoron, like nobody loves unconditionally. Everybody's got some conditions, right? But I tell you, I think that's one of the gifts that I have. I accept you for where you are, and it doesn't matter where that is. I would be the person that's going to talk to the homeless person out on the street and sit down and have a whole conversation about their life and be very comfortable with sitting on the grass with them talking. I would be the person who would talk to a person that may be begging for money outside of a gas station store. And I may be the one that'll come out and give them some money. I may be the one that's handing out money to homeless people on the side of the street. I promise you, the way I look at people is that God made us and we're all brothers and sisters. And I really do feel like I am my brother and sister's keeper. And if I can't do anything else for you, I can pray for you. And I know that my pastors all throughout my life, my birthday is Sunday, and I know I've learned a lot of that from them. And I also wanted to say some of the gifts, in addition to loving unconditionally, is I don't know what it is, but every person that hugs me says the same thing. It says, Sharon, when I hug you, it's almost like I can just pass out, or energy. It just feels like I get relaxed, or something happens. It's like you have a motherly hug. And so when I started my life coaching practice, I realized that was a gift. And there is such a thing called hug therapy. And so I used to offer hug therapy in my life coaching practice. And in my practice, family coaching is my strong suit. I very much so believe in making marriage good again, right? Having people who really value and honor being with the one that they love and being with them forever. So I do that as well in my personal community. And I remember being exposed, and now I know that you see April Spears and we have a very, very good friendship. But she was just, her and I developed community with each other very quickly. And we shared so much in the religious realm. And we bounce things off of each other. We talk a lot. And we always spoke into each other's lives. Like, she's a national recording artist, and she don't believe that. Trust me, she doesn't. But she has every quality to be able to do that. And I remember just giving her information in regards to, hey, in Tennessee, there's a lady who used to work for us, and her name was Betty Tilley, and she got this particular recording artist, did this, that, and the other. And I showed her the video, and she ended up going to Tennessee, recording her album called Heal the Land. It's on YouTube right now. And for me, she knew I wanted to write a book. And she was like, well, Sharon, we're just going to speak that. And we're just going to say, God is going to have you at the right time in the right place and write your book. And I was like, yeah, no. Like, I can't even put ideas on a page or on a book, or write like I want to write without it being all jumbled up and everything. And then what happens? A lady calls me on Facebook, and she says, hey, you didn't give me a call. And so I end up calling her, and she says, listen, you don't know me, but I know you. I sit in the back of you, 4 rows back, on the opposite side of you in your church. And I know a lady, her name is Sheila Reynolds, and she's doing a volume of the book called The Bloom, and they're looking for authors. And I think your story would be a great story to go in their book. Well, guess what? That connection allowed me to be able to be a co-author in a book called The Bloom, volume number 2. And I was able to tell my story to help other women. So it's just things like that where people and energy and, they can help and inspire, and even thoughts are things. At Dudley Products, I learned in that community, thoughts are things that people can literally speak things into existence. And then I got exposed to a work called The Secret that says, hey, you just need to raise your level of energy, believe that you're going to attain something, act as if it's already so, don't worry about the how, right? And in that community, I was like, oh my gosh, so this is what is said, but let me try it out, right? So for literally 2 years, I found a dream home that I was like, I'm never going to be able to afford this house. And the community that I was in that believed that, you can manifest. And they kept saying, Sharon, this is real. Just put it up on your computer, have pictures of it, and just imagine and visualize yourself in that house every day. So I took it a step further. Every morning on my way to work, I would go by that house, pull in the driveway, and visualize myself being there, and then go home. And then at lunchtime, instead of going to lunch with everybody else, I would get in my car, go pick me up something for lunch, and eat lunch in my driveway of my dream home. And then I would go home, and then at the end of the day, at 6 o'clock, I would get off work, go to the dream home first like I was going home, visualize getting out, going in, pulling my coat off, shoes off, fixing dinner, getting kids' homework done, getting their baths, etc., etc. And then I would go home, right? So I did this for 2 years straight, literally. And when I did this for 2 years straight, it was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's happening, right? So I was at my job, long story short, at my job, they wanted me to be a part of the culture committee, right? I got on the culture committee, and idea came to my head, hey, I think would be good to raise morale in this particular organization would be a part of something wonderful called Big Brothers Big Sisters. They have a bowling event every year. Let's do that. And so at Aon Hewitt, they deal with benefits, right? So we had a COBRA team, a FSA team, a benefits, health benefits team, a pension team or defined benefits team, and we were all bowling. But the guy that was over the Big Brothers Big Sisters at the time, his name was Bert Grissard. And Bert was showing me how to set up the teams. And one time we had a meeting, we were talking, and he stops right in the middle of his talk and says, I think you ought to buy my house. Long story short, the house that he wanted me to buy was the house I've been going to for 2 years. And he sold it to me for what he owed on the home. So Sharon, making $40,000 a year, pretty decent credit, had saved some money, but Sharon was able to purchase a home for $200,000 that was valued at $400,000. And I was able to manifest that. So that was a community that showed me I can manifest just by really imagining, believing with every fiber of my being of what I'm trying to imagine is going to be mine. And then visualizing every day and speaking affirmations towards that coming to me. And it worked. So I learned so much from that community. And I also wanted to share one more thing. I tell you what, Riley, it was just wonderful, right? But on page 94 in chapter 7, I believe, there was just a sentence that said, sometimes watching someone else flip the switch liberates your own hands to do likewise. I promise you that is a very true statement. I am doing things now that I never, ever thought I would be doing, like ever. And it took someone like Guyla Cooper to go to Wake Divinity School and her to say to me, Sharon, I think you ought to come to our orientation. And for me to be like, what? Like School of Divinity? Huh? What the day is, right? And so, but I just, I had a compelling desire to want to go, but couldn't go because I was working, I had classes. WSSU was just, meetings started coming on my calendar like crazy. And it was just, I was like, oh my gosh. So on the day of the HBCU day last year, the whole campus of Winston-Salem State University internet went down for 5 hours. Now I've been with Winston-Salem State for 9 years. That has never happened. So we were all sitting at our desk, waiting on the internet to come up. And I just told my boss, I said, well, I'm going to run an errand and I'll be back. She said, no problem. Just take your own time, and when the internet comes back up, you can come on back to work. I said, okay, cool. So I came over to HBCU Day last year. And that's how I got there. So it took my coworker, my community at Winston-Salem State University to encourage me to be at Wake Divinity. So in a nutshell, community is valuable. Community is important. And without community, I would not be where I am today. And my ministers in my life have had a very, very large impact on bringing value to community, belonging, feeling a part of, and having people speak into your life in a positive way to let you know who you are. I really enjoyed this video. Thank you for offering this medium to be fully expressed.